Wait a minute, what's happening? Why are there two RZRs in the garage?
All right, so we have a second RZR. This is a RZR 800, a little bit of an older car. We talked about what we're gonna do with this. I'm gonna show you where we're starting at.
So, RZR 800, 2009, in all of its glory. So, this car is a little bit beat up. It's gonna need some loving. Specifically, it's gonna need loving down there. That motor is toast. It is done. So, why would I buy a RZR with a bad motor? Well, a couple reasons. First off, this RZR already has a long travel kit and Fox shocks on it, which I'm pretty excited about it. Has an aftermarket exhaust, has a Dynojet power commander in it. So it already has quite a few really good features I'm looking for. Now it's missing some things I want, like doors, a working motor. So one of the problems I am running into with these cars, and this car is specifically going to be for my kids and for my wife. An 800 is a big enough car that my wife can enjoy it. So while I can be in the turbo, this is something they can have some fun with. So one of the problems I ran into with these cars is all the ones I look at have massive amount of miles on them because they're older cars. They have like anywhere from about 5,000 to 6,000 miles. So realistically, how much motor is left in those cars? So this car has only 2,500 miles on it. And unfortunately, the previous owner ran it without oil, which happens on these. You got to be careful because they do have some crankcase pressure and they do have a little bit of blow by. And if you just don't check the oil periodically, this can happen. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to yank this motor out and we're going to have it rebuilt. So we're going to basically be starting with kind of 0 miles on the motor, which is awesome. And since it's got the long travel kit, the car is sitting right at 60 inches wide, which is considerably 10 inches wider. So considerably wider than what a RZR 800 would normally be. This is more comparable to an 800S. And by the time we're done with it, after what I paid for the car, because I got a smoking deal, we'll add some doors, we're gonna get the motor rebuilt, and some other features. We're gonna be at a significantly lower cost than what a RZR 800S would cost me, and we're not gonna have to worry about a bunch of miles on it. So first things first, it's time for teardown. And we got to yank that motor out of there and get it to the rebuilder, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the video. And yeah, so let's get started. All right, so we got the bed off pretty easy, just a bunch of screws, a couple clips. I unhooked the wiring harness for the tail lights, and now these guys are just laying right here. So we're going to take all this stuff off and we're going to keep digging down to that motor, get the heart of this thing out of there. All right, so a little update. Our exhaust is off. I put a little bit of I actually used Seafoam Deepcrete because I had it laying around, kind of like a PB Blaster kind of thing. Put that on the bolts. They popped right out with the impact. You probably saw I took the whole subframe off, the tops, everything's accessible there. Clutch cover, I was a little disappointed to know that you have to actually remove the whole seatbelt attachment to be able to get the clutch cover off, which is a little disappointing as far as the work I have to do, but it is what it is. I mean, we're all in at this point. We've already bought the car, so that's that. So now I've tagged one of the spark plug wires. I'm gonna start taking kind of all the ignition stuff off. So that's all out of the way. We got to get in there and get that sway bar mount off, but we're making progress. This is not that hard of a job. It just takes a little bit of time. I actually have a huge pile of parts that have come off of it. And my plan is every one of these parts is going to get cleaned up and taken care of before it ends up back on the car. Once the motor's out, we're going to get in and power wash this out really good. I want to start with a really nice, clean situation. So yeah, so that's pretty much where we're at. So I'm going to keep moving forward. And hopefully my time lapse is working, so you'll get to see that. But hopefully we're gonna have the motor out here quickly because I like to get it to the rebuild guy as soon as possible, since there is a bit of a wait and I wanna be in line. All right, so at this point, I've kind of rolled it out here. This is so greasy and dirty, and looks like there's an old rat's nest in there, a mouse nest. I'm gonna spray a bunch of degreaser all over this, and I'm gonna go through and give it a quick power wash just to kind of clean it up, just to kind of get a good start. That way, get a little bit easier as we take this out. It won't be as dirty, and it'll be easier just to kind of wash it all while it's still sitting in here. That way it's got a chance to dry before we pull it out. All right, so I have all the degreaser sprayed everywhere. When I do stuff like this, I like the super clean stuff a little bit better than the simple green, just because of the fact that it does have a higher pH level and it sort of digs into the grime a little bit better. So we're gonna kind of let that soak for a few minutes. I'm gonna put some rags in the intake and the exhaust holes, and I'm just gonna power wash this down to kind of clean it up a little bit. So moving forward, it's just not as gross and dirty of a job. All right, we are looking a lot better. That super clean stuff did its job. Still got a little bit more to clean up, but overall, I mean, the engine's looking like new again, which is cool. Too bad the insides are not. What we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna jack it up, and we're gonna pull some axles out. I'm gonna put it back on the wheel and tire because I do wanna be able to move it around and work on it while the engine's off at the machine shop to be rebuilt. But one of the axles we have, it is all tore up and it is kind of making a bunch of noise. So I'm pretty sure, I mean, this CV is definitely shot. So I'm gonna yank the axle out and then we'll get it back on its feet. That way it can kind of be a rolling chassis as I work on it. And we'll order up some new axles, just because when you're this far into it, doesn't hurt to, they're inexpensive. We're just gonna put some axles in it. Now, all right, so I wanna show you guys the process of taking the axles out. If you've never done it, it's actually pretty easy. You first take the wheel off, then what you're gonna have is sort of a castle nut down here, which is gonna come off. I'll show you, just like this. So a castle nut, you'll remove the cotter pin, take this castle nut off, which I just used an impact, and then there's a couple washers. Now at this point, all you have to do is take off the brake caliper, which is just 2 bolts. I've already got the bottom one out, so I'm just gonna unscrew this top one off. Once this comes off, you're able to just remove the brake caliper, and then you can slide the whole brake assembly. So that guy's out. Be careful not to compress the pads or step on the brake pedal when those are loose like that. But then this guy is just it's gonna come right off. You gotta give it a little bit of a tug. And then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna unscrew these 2 bolts, and then the whole hub assembly comes off, and then you can just yank the axle right out. So we have to remove the axles to be able to get the differential and transmission out, which are all bolted to the motor. And then the other axle we had was shot anyway. We already have that one out. Yeah. Okay, so we got our axle out. We just yanked it out. This one I had to do a little bit of tapping from this side once I got the whole assembly off to get the axle out. It was a little bit wedged in there. There wasn't very much grease on the splines, which is probably why. So again, I've just put these 2 bolts back in here. These are not tight. I just have them in there finger tight so they don't go anywhere. And if you can see, so this guy, it's being held on by the brake caliper. So with that being said, I'm gonna put the wheel back on again, making this a rolling chassis. But I wanna make sure, again, I don't do anything extreme. If I'm rolling it around, it'll be very, very carefully because of the fact that there's no castle nut holding that hub in place onto the axle, which sandwiches that full assembly. So we're gonna measure up our axles, order some new axles, and we're getting very close to pulling the motor out. I think at this point we're looking at a few motor mounts. And then also we have a couple sensors that I think need to be unplugged. But other than that, I think we're ready to put an engine hoist or cherry picker on this and start trying to navigate its way out. We do have to drain radiator fluid out, which I'll be doing here shortly. But we're really close to pulling this whole assembly out, which I'm excited about. And again, get this off to the machine shop in the builder. All right. Things have progressed. So my buddy Jacob came over. Hello, Emily. Hi. Emily came to help. So we got a little Got a cherry picker motor lift. So what we did is we took out, here's a, right there, motor mount there, one in the back here, one around the other side. Pretty straightforward, just takes some work to get the screws out. We unhooked all these sensors, unhooked the transmission, the shifter. So now the plan is to try to get this guy out and lift the whole thing out. So we got the cage off just to make it a little bit easier. I don't know what that's all about. It's apparently a dance party. Okay, so we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna try to jack this guy up and out. All right, so after fighting this thing for a while, we went ahead and got the drive shaft out by just loosening up the front diff and moving it forward. This is the right thing to do. Plus, when we go to put it back in, it's gonna be easier. So we just kind of got the motor up in front here. And we're just gonna jack it up and out. So hopefully, smooth sailing. All right, here's the aftermath. We've got some cleanup to do, but like you can see, what you saw in the video, the motor is out. There's the whole drivetrain right there. So we're gonna take this out to the builder, get him started, and take a little time for the rebuild. We are gonna be upgrading from the 800 motor. We're gonna turn it into what we call, it's called an 800S motor, which is basically a different cam, I think is the main difference. So we're gonna be upgrading it to the high output version. And then we got a lot of work to do over here. So while it's off at the builder, we're gonna clean everything out. We're gonna take these arms off because we're gonna put some doors on. We're just gonna do a lot of cleanup is really the best word because there's just mud and oil and grease and dirt and grime, and we're just going to clean. And we're also going to, the wiring is a bit of a mess. We're going to clean all that up from people putting aftermarket stuff in it. And then we're going to go through and clean up the bed and all these parts. We're going to do some different wheels and tires, like you see. Some spacers there. So we got a lot going on, but let's get the, we're going to get the motor out to the builder because that's what's going to take the most time of this whole thing is getting our motor back. All right, so I'm here with Rich, the engine builder. Hi, Rich. And there it is. So we got it on his cart, and it's off to get rebuilt. So we'll find out what's inside of this thing and get a better idea of what's happened and go from there. Well, I think that's gonna do it for this video. Once the motor gets back, we'll be able to install it. I'll keep you informed on the progress we're making. Thank you so much for everyone who has liked and subscribed to the channel. And appreciate your support.